Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and today we'll be talking about an unorthodox build for a really underrated character. I think based on some stats I've seen from the community, Xinyan is one of the lowest played units in the Abyss so far. With the recent events in Genshin including her a little more in the story, I felt it was about time to do some experimenting on her, and hence this video. Now some of you may be wondering why is Xinyan so underutilized currently, and the real main issue with Xinyan is that her kit is split scaling. What this means is you need to build her in multiple stats in order for her to see some form of damage improvement. Basically, her shielding and charge attacks at C6 skill of defense, but her normal attack, elemental skill damage and elemental burst damage skills of attack. On top of that, she is Pyro element. At C4, she gives physical resistance shred and physical damage buff. Traditionally, Pyro is not an element that leads up to superconduct, so this is a really awkward situation for a character that boosts physical damage to be in. All this put together inherently makes her a very endgame character to build, since you need to get good artifacts that min-max in all of her stat verticals. Most would see more value in investing in another character, like maybe Ito or C6 Noelle, to get better overall team value and team flexibility as well. Now I used to think this way too and put off building my Xinyan for the longest time. But since the arrival of Koki Shinobu, I started to rethink characters that were following just the mainstream crit chain of thought a little bit too much. And that was when I realized something about Xinyan's kit was forgotten by the community, and myself included. When her elemental skill hits 2 or more targets, she actually gets a level 3 on her shield. This then pulses Pyro in a radius around the active character. Now this may not seem a lot on its own, but when coupled together with her burst that instantly procs and refreshes this shield at level 3 too, this allows us to play Xinyan in a quick swap, Pyro application off-field type of character that is much different from Thoma, in which active characters don't have to normal attack. Now this then leads to us building her elemental mastery like Koki. A focus on elemental mastery allows us to bypass all that split scaling stat requirement that a crit build needs. And being Pyro, she has access to strong overloaded and burning damage. With Dendro and Sumeru coming up, EM Xinyan would likely be a quick way for most players to get access to a Pyro character, stacking EM and applying burning off-field. This way you don't have to break your Xiangling's build, and you could still run Rider National in the other half. At this point, the question that I needed to answer was why EM Xinyan and not just play Thoma instead. Now as mentioned previously, for Thoma's rotations, you need to add in a couple of auto attacks here and there in order to proc his fiery collapse. This inherently makes his comp much more restrictive since you need an additional requirement in your rotations. Recently, Hoiverse also added in a patch where when a character is undergoing a burst animation, the shields will no longer take damage and you and the shield are pseudo invulnerable. This means that reactions can continue to occur from the passive pulses in your iframe and fits very well into a quick swap and iframe manipulation build, even if your shield is very thin. Now, the next point and more importantly is that Xinyan's artifact choices are much more supportive and varying thanks to her scaling now tuned for EM. Flower and Feather artifacts, HP and attack, both of which Thoma scales with, don't matter as much to an EM built Xinyan, since her shield scales off defense and not HP. There are currently no flat main stat defense pieces like the Flower or Feather, and this means that Xinyan can actually run 4-star artifacts on the Feather and Flower without much detriment to her overall kit. This actually makes it pretty viable to even run a 2-piece Exile 2-piece emblem to get that 40% energy bump, or even a 4-piece Exile set that provides energy buff to the whole team and turns Xinyan into a battery for a rainbow team. Sands can either be EM or ER depending on your team comp and your character requirements. And for those who don't really need the additional ER, you could even run Xinyan with a 4-piece instructor set to proc the EM buff to the whole team as well. With a sacrificial weapon, Xinyan is also able to proc the instructor set extremely well. Now, if that is not all, you can also even go for a third choice, and that will be running a 4-piece tenacity on Xinyan, which when her E pulses gives good attack buffs to the entire party. Of course you can run traditional builds like 2-piece Wanderer, 2-piece Emblem and etc. As for weapons, I tried to use the Rain Slasher as a proxy for EM weapons, and even some weird ones like the Bell, but my favourite is still the Sacrificial Greatsword, since it allows her to perform this role even better as a battery and also increasing uptime on her E. Favonius is pretty restrictive since it requires her to crit in order to proc the passive, and I don't want to have to force myself to find crit rate exile pieces since it's quite hard to farm, only coming from weekly bosses and the like. But even after talking about all of this, all these points in isolation are just possibilities. But it's only when we start to consider other characters and the eventual Dendro reactions that are going to be added to the game that we start to see the true viability of this Xinyan build. The key lies with Cookie Shinobu. Cookie provides a similar radial electro proc that pulses and heals in her elemental skill. This means that by casting Xinyan and Cookie's E, you actually get a passive proccing of Overload in an AoE circle around them. Cookie doesn't like to build energy recharge normally since she gets much more value by investing in EM, HP and healing bonus. And with Xinyan as a battery with Exile Set and Sacrificial Greatsword, you essentially allow the two 4-stars to become very symbiotic, providing elemental damage, healing, shielding, all in an AoE around the active character. And the character that makes use of this the best is Kazuha. Since he pulls in the enemies towards him, the off-field overload reactions hit the enemy much more consistently. And something that not many people know is that Xinyan's interaction with Kazuha is very different from other Pyro shielding characters. Currently, all Pyro shielders like Thoma, Yanfei, which is a C4 Yanfei variant, do not offer Pyro Infusion to Kazuha naturally, as we see from these clips. This means that if you don't hit the enemy to proc Pyro, you can't infuse Pyro quickly and control the element that you are planning to infuse. Xinyan on the other hand provides a very interesting mechanic that is again often overlooked. Although the passive here states that it only infuses Xinyan with Pyro, if we quickly switch from Xinyan to Kazuha, the Pyro self-application lingers and transfers over to Kazuha. In practice, this allows us to swirl Electro with the first E and then slam dunk with Pyro, allowing us to control whether we want to decide Electro or Pyro to infuse based on the situation. And of course, with Burning leaving both Dendro and Pyro statuses on the target, both infusions have a place given Electro's increased importance possibly in the future. At this point, I will run a Dendro in the 4th slot. But this video is before Sumeru launches, and I think that a character like Albedo or Mona would function pretty well in the 4th slot right now. I'll probably be doing an updated guide analysing Dendro reactions and all the characters in a future video, so do subscribe and stay tuned for it in future as well. I seriously think this team comp and build is tons of fun and gives Xinyan viability in the game, and we'll see tremendous upside in 3.0 and onwards. If you like unorthodox videos and refreshing ways of playing existing characters, check out these other videos right here. See you in the next video.